Welcome to the No Name Brand Podcast. My name is Sashka Hanarappel, actress, singer, dancer, turned brand marketing, sales, and advertising strategist who brands your soul. And each week I bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover your underdog, turn up your leadership notches, challenge the status quo, because you're fast and furious with a powerful message to share with the world. Thank you for taking time out with me today, and without further ado, let's get our creative and wisdom juices flowing. Welcome back, creative visionaries, to this week's episode with me as your host for the No Name Brand Podcast, where I invite inspiring and visionary guests from around the world to share their thought leadership on entrepreneurship, their world and business philosophy, and at the same time, because I'm all about putting knowledge into action, learning something new that you can implement today to be the change that you want to see and be in the world. Words, 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 words. Now, for some, words are a nightmare, especially if they suffer from silly things like dyslexia, and where society tells them that this is a weakness. Now, we know better that in today's society and in today's world, it's a strength. But for some, words are life. Words are an expression and an expansion. But where do words come from? School? Egypt? Hieroglyphics? Well, not only. It also comes from the media, TV, radio, stage, plays, books, and more. Words tend to have been taken for granted by many as it's a daily part of our lives. Texting, SMS, WhatsApp, social media, hashtag, replay. But have you ever stopped to think on how the words that we read can affect our decisions, moods, choices, and more? Our next guest is a word geek. I love word geeks. In fact, he's been a professional writer, get this, for over 20 years. Writing poetry, stage plays, radio work, fiction, TV, and film scripts, including adaptations of novels. Makes me think maybe my book could be made into an adaptation. Words help you think economically, as there is a span of opportunities. You see, poetry helps you think visually and use words economically, which is both helpful for TV and film. Or if a screenplay doesn't get commissioned, it may want another life as a novel or vice versa. Now, all marketing and advertising for all business owners, that is you listening, requires words that are strung together to speak directly to the audience so that they can feel closer to you and build know-like trust. Because not everybody wants to be on video or doing some kind of video. Sometimes you really just want to express yourself through words. Often creative visionaries find it difficult to string together a proper sentence of their vision and explain it to their audience, which is why I'm excited to have our next guest expert to share some light on the world of copywriting and telling your story. He's a writer, director, and performer with 2 BAFTA nominations, the Boot Street Band and Queen's Nose, with awards such as an award for the Best Drama Series, Best Cinematography, I love cinematography, from the Royal Television Society for the Queen's Nose, Writers Guild Award, Best Continuing Drama Series for the Bill, and many, 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 many more. This episode will be full of golden nuggets, so get a pen and paper and let's put our hands together. If you're driving, put your ears together for the one and only Steve Attridge. Hello, Steve.
Hello there. I didn't quite recognize who you were talking about. You wouldn't like my agent, would you?
I'd love to.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's a done deal.
Awesome. How are you today? Where are you in the world?
I'm good. I'm in a little village just outside Stratford-on-Avon, so Shakespeare's just around the corner.
Oh, cool.
It's a sunny day. It's a nice day. Probably not as warm as where you are, but I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and the listeners today. So let's dive in. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things in 3 different categories, starting with entrepreneurship, moving into philosophy, and then education, where our listeners can learn and take some notes, putting the knowledge into application. So first thing, entrepreneurship. How did you actually get into or choose your genre or your niche that you love working in and writing for?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer because as a child, I think I discovered that language was the key to survival. I went to a very tough school, and if you weren't lucky, you got beaten up a lot.
Ooh.
But what I discovered was if I could make someone laugh, or if I could tell them a story, there was less chance of me getting hurt. So there was something about language being able to weave a magic spell around your immediate environment and get you out of trouble, as well as sometimes getting you into trouble. It was a very practical thing, but I also loved the idea of two things. One, of creating your own reality. And what I learned was as a child, if I had a terrible day, I could go home, go to bed, make up the day differently as a story to myself. That was really important to me. So therefore, language had something talismanic and magical about it in order to transform and control reality.
So when you were a kid, I mean, most kids are like, I was reading quite a lot of Enid Blyton, and I was into all the crime, what's called James Bond and all those type of things, crime stories. Now, as a kid, and you're trying to save your butt by getting it kicked, what kind of language were you speaking? What kind of stories were you weaving in? What was it that inspired you? What books, what genres inspired you in your life as a kid in the situations that you were in? Like, how are you talking?
The ones that I loved were Richard Crompton's William books, because I don't know if you know the William books, but they were incredibly popular in the 40s and the 50s and a little bit in the 60s. And William is, as an ordinary family, he lives in a village, but he's an outsider. And the titles tell you the story: William the Outlaw, William the Rebel. And so William was both part of his family, but essentially an outsider too. And that really appealed to me, that idea that you are of the world, but you don't quite belong in it. Did you get zoomed down from outer space? I think that's a very common feeling for not just for children, but for adults, that somehow you're a stranger in a strange land. And so I liked fiction that explored that idea of being something of an alien, something of an outsider. And it was novels. And the other thing that was important to me was improvising a story. So I was an only child, but I had lots of puppets. So I would spend a lot of time talking to these, the bear or the frog or the pirate or the queen or the king in my hand, and assigning them roles. So there was a kind of omniscience about that, and a godlike quality that I really liked. And years later, I read Herman Melville, Moby Dick writer, letters in which he said a writer is like a god paring his fingernails. And so that appealed to me, that idea. So there's something deeply psychotic and troubled about that, I'm sure, but nevertheless, it was important to me.
It is. I mean, as a kid, you're playing with the puppets and you're putting yourself in different roles, and you're not aware of the terminology that it's also psychology. So you're playing with all these different roles, and because of the perception that you've seen and read, but creating your own perception that things weren't experienced by people outside of your circle. So you were literally creating a new world for yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think when you do it in a healthy and creative and constructive way, what you're doing, even if it's with puppets, is you're trying to find their character. You're trying to find their voice. You're wondering what it's like to be an other. And I think that creates empathy and sympathy and all kinds of imaginative possibilities for what it's like to be other people. Where it goes wrong, I think, is where you've got the puppets and you just want to control them. That's where that's when you're a fascist dictator and you simply want other people to behave in the way that you want. And you see that in a lot of contemporary political life, I think. The rage when the world doesn't behave as you want it to. Whereas my feeling is that is that you should celebrate that, because it's the moments where you are surprised by joy, where you come across the unexpected, And so these days, I don't worry about feeling lost, because the thing about feeling lost is you'll discover things, or being in a fog, you'll bump into something interesting. You might bump into something dangerous too, but that's the risk that you take. So it was the idea of outsider quality, sort of feeling like something of an alien, but also it was the imaginative possibilities of discovering what it's like to be other.
I love that. Now, going into entrepreneurship with all this creativity and imagination and passion and empathy and sympathy, usually when you create your own world, you step into another world and there's different rules and regulations. When did you decide this is not for me? I need to do my own thing. And how did you bridge the gap between working for someone and working for yourself?
It was quite organic, I think. I did have a sort of plan. I mean, I worked in universities and I lectured a lot until I got commissions and enough work to keep me going for at least 2 years. And I was lucky enough for that to happen. And so that's when I took a kind of leap into the unknown. And I think for a couple of years I was quite arrogant and I thought I knew best. And I lost work because of that. And sometimes, people wouldn't come back to me. But I'm capable of learning from my mistakes. And so what I then learned is that no matter how grand you think you are as a writer or an artist or whatever, you are ultimately a hired hand. And whether it's a publisher or a TV company or a film company or a theatre, they are paying you for something that they want. So you might try and get all your stuff into it, but nevertheless, if you sign a contract and you want to get paid, you have to deliver what they want as well. I think on the one hand you do that, but then if you're canny, you think, well, that's also buying me time where I can go into my cave and do what Leonard Cohen says, chip away at the chalk face on the things that are really close to your heart. And then you bring them back to the world. And sometimes the world doesn't like them and they sit on your desk forever. But that's okay, because at least you've been privileged enough to be able to do those things. I mean, McCarthy is one of the writers I really love, and he's always gone completely his own way. But I think I've tried to achieve a balance.
I love that. And also, like I said in the beginning, in the introduction, is something might be lying on your table for ages, but it's an adaptation for a novel, or maybe the novel is something more for a screenplay rather than what it was intended for. So it might look like you're in the fog with something on the desk, but actually you bump into something that's something unexpected and a little bit dangerous and a little bit exciting because it has a new perspective for whatever it is, what it was destined to become. But you had to take the step to actually write it. You had to have, that initial, yes, okay, I have the idea, and then put it into action.
That's absolutely true, yeah. And you can't, I think people who don't get anywhere are people who do one thing and then that's their life's work, all their eggs are in one basket, and then they get bitter because nobody wants that, but they still try and hold it. I think you have to leave it alone, and you have to have lots of things going, ideally at the same time, and accept that what you think is your best work may never ever get done, and never ever see the light of day. But you're absolutely right. So one thing can lead to another. I mean, just to give a practical example, a couple of years ago, I had what I thought was a great idea for a book. And I got a meeting with a publisher, which is very hard to get nowadays. But so I went down to London, I met this publisher, and I pitched my book. I could see within 2 minutes he was bored silly. I got my mouth open, so I carried on thinking, I've wasted a whole day coming down here. And in the end, he got so bored that he started looking through my CV, and he said, "Oh, you wrote this thing for the BBC years ago, this film called Hawkins?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I really like that." He said, "How about we do a series of books based on that character?" So I said, "Yes." So going down and failing completely, my great idea, as far as this man was concerned, was a complete dud. But something that I'd done years ago then took up a different mantle and became a couple of years' work, so it's good.
I think that's so important, especially for creative visionaries, is that we've got so many ideas, so many downloads. We don't often see what the golden thread is in our vision. And then we create a lot of things, but something for now might not be for now, it might be for later, or might be for the next generation. Someone might find it and like, oh my God, this is amazing. What is your golden thread that goes through everything?
I like the image of the golden thread is a very good one. And I think it would be what I alluded to earlier. My golden thread thematically is that I'm really interested in people who test the boundaries of things and feel slightly outside of the world. You know, it's that old thing about the referee observes, sees most of the game, and who tests the limits of experience. And I think it's only after years of working that I realised that that was my theme. I'm interested in people who climb the mountain simply because it's there, or are prepared to take that step into the darkness just to find out what's happening there in a much more modest way. That's how I've lived a bit, sometimes to my cost, but sometimes to my betterment. That's my golden thread. And also, I do believe that old adage that, and it's not just true of writers, it's true of all sorts of people, that nothing is lost on you. You know, no matter how bad things seem to be, that's an experience that you can use. Failure is a very interesting, idea and theme and experience, and it's also universal. So if you can say something about failure, enduring it, overcoming it, even befriending it, perhaps, then that's the first step out of failure, as it were. Whatever happens to you after.
I love that. How do you decide what project you want to take on? Like, for example, you're speaking to the publisher and he mentioned about Hawkins that you've written about and creating a book series out of that. How did you decide in that moment, yeah, actually, that's what I want to do? Or like, no. So what's your criteria?
Criteria are partly practical. If somebody is excited about something that I'm either doing or could do, then enthusiasm is infectious. So I'm starting thinking down that road. And also, I think if a door is open for you, it's worth going into it. You can always say no later, but I do think, say yes to everything.
Yes, man!
I've got a friend, I don't see her much, but we were actually at school together. And when she has a difficult time in life, what she does is then she has a period and she chooses whether it's going to be 6 weeks or 6 months where she will say yes to everything. Now, that's dangerous, of course, but, you get the idea is a good one. The things that would normally be outside her comfort zone, she will take on, or at least dip a toe. There are limits, of course,
I love that.
I think a lot of it happens at an unconscious level. You suddenly discover that your thoughts and perhaps your feelings too are being occupied by a particular subject or a particular area of human experience. And, so that's what Stephen King says, that's the time to dive into the pool and see what's there. And sometimes there's nothing.
I love that. Now, have you seen and experienced the world of writing and directing and performance over 2 decades that you've been in business and been in the field? What have been pivotal moments that have almost defined the industry, that have influenced generations that have come in where they've gone, okay, that's been a pivotal moment where people are building on top of that rather than conventional ways of writing?
Okay, well, there's so much. I mean, the landscape is changing as we're talking. In my life, the big pivotal moments have been where the old guard, as it were, is starting to fall away a little bit. When I started, there were the big institutions. There were the publishing houses, there was BBC, there was Channel 4, there was Hollywood, there were film companies. And the internet blew that apart. If I was starting now, I would go about it differently. I wouldn't try to get an agent. I wouldn't go knocking on the door of the RSC or the BBC. I would say, there is a golden world here of opportunities through whether it's YouTube or self-publishing. I've completely changed my mind about self-publishing, of not just social media, but all the kind of apparatus that goes with the internet that you can use and with enhanced technology. And so the good thing about that is that it's given people the possibilities of having more control over their work. And you have to think about it completely differently. I'm a novice to this, so I'm still grappling with it, but I can see a way forward. You take control of your own working and imaginative life, and then you think about marketing it, about building an audience or building readership. What you don't do is say, there's a world of experts out there, and they're the only ones, they're the guardians to the temple. I have to go through them. You don't have to do that.
So true. Yep, that's so true. There would definitely be a pivotal moment. Were a direction written about you, about your life, what would you want it to leave as a taste to those watching it?
A direction?
Mm.
What do you
A director play or a screenplay or a novel or, yeah.
Oh God.
What is the taste that you'd like? Usually when you finish a book or you finish watching a movie or a screenplay, it leaves a certain taste in your mouth, or you like, or in your heart or whatever, but it's just that, what would you like to leave behind or have people taste?
Of my own work, or just
Yes, about you and your life, yeah.
Oh, okay. Of my own work, it would be, well, like all writers, I love everything I've done.
Good.
I would say there was a TV series I wrote called The Boot Street Band. Though I say it myself, I think it was good comedy. It was made by BBC Children's, but it did get something of an adult audience. And what I liked about it was that it was set in a school, and it was asking the big what if question. Mm-hmm. And the big what if question was, what if children ran the school? What would it be like? And at the time, it was very much an entrepreneurial culture, so they ran it as a business. So it was a simple inversion. All the adults in the school were children. They didn't know what was going on. So the headmaster was a version of King Lear. He was mad. He didn't know what he was doing. And he just wanted to live in a rainforest. So the children built him a rainforest in his office. And then they got on with the business of running the school. So I think that would be it. And it was the gentle, questioning, comedic anarchy of the show that I'm still very fond of. So I think that would be a taste that I would like to leave.
Goosebumps, I love it. Like, I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to live in that world. You taught words, copywriting, performance, direction for many years, and still do at various universities, organizations, and in different countries. What has been the golden thread of it all around the world? What has been the common denominator of what you teach, the philosophy of what you teach?
The philosophy of what I teach is listen to everyone else, but then go your own way, certainly. And I think the importance of critical thinking about oneself and about the world. I always say the biggest thing you can have as a writer is to interrogate the moment. What if? We're here talking to each other, but what if there is something else going on? What if there is a ghost behind you listening? What are they saying? What if, in fact, I'm really a cult leader and I'm trying to draw you and your listeners into it? So the asking what if questions at the interrogating the moment, I think, cracks reality open to all kinds of possibilities and different genres. One of the things I always say to groups is, okay, there's two of us here. How many points of view are there possible? And people usually say, well, two. There's you, Sasha, and there's me. Maybe there's a neutral third. And I always say, well, there's probably, several billion microbes in the air. Perhaps there's a spider in the corner looking down. Perhaps there's a mouse on the floor. These are all possibilities. Perhaps there's a ghost in the room. And once you start exploring those possibilities, you move towards the genre that you like. If you like the idea of the ghost being the storyteller, then that tells you, maybe you want to write a supernatural story. If it's the spider in the corner, maybe you're a Charlotte's Web person and you want to write something creepy or something for children. So I think it's critical thinking and interrogating life and encourage your own restlessness.
I think that's so important. Something that I work with my community, or that I'm an avid supporter of, is always, I was told as a young child to stop asking why, because I was always why, and I got told to stop. And that what if or why and interrogating, that's what keeps me alive, because someone will ask something and I'll go, yeah, but why? Or what if this happened? Or reading between the lines, because that can't be true. There has to be something else. And I love that analogy, or the picture that you painted. I think for things that I'm going to be writing now, for the listeners as well, writing something or a social post or just, something for your book, seeing it from a different perspective, like who would be telling the story? Would it be you, or would it be someone, the Charlotte's Web or the spider or the mouse? I love that idea. Very cool. Now, as a creative visionary, there are a multitude of ideas. I mentioned that before, that are downloaded per second. Like we're always just like ding, 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 ding. There's some, especially if we're interrogating the ideas and asking what if and why. Some are nonsense, and have no relativity to the life or the business and at all. And some ideas are prominent for the next quantum leap that we need. And often in split seconds, like you had in the office with a publisher where you're like, do I do this or don't I do it? Yes. What are tangible steps for our listeners today on how or on what you've taught others to sort their thoughts and ideas out? I know this is a very complex question, but something very simple when creating a framework for a storytelling canvas.
I'm a great list maker. And I think what I would encourage people to do is what you always want to do is make things manageable. And if I'm working with a group of people who want to, in my case, obviously write something, it's usually they've got too many ideas or the idea is too big. And so the sense is there's little me and there's the mountain you want to climb. And what I always say is you've got to reverse that. There's got to be big you and delineate different tasks. So one of the things you can do is to make a list. Stephen King calls it my 10 bears. And what he means by that is when he starts a new book, he writes his list of 10 current bears. And by that he means 10 scary things, 10 things that frighten him at the moment. And so I've sort of adapted that to my own uses. So if I'm starting something, I'll give you a practical example because it helps. I was talking to a lady once who wanted to write her autobiography. And she said, it's just too big. You know, my life's so confusing. So many things have happened. I've been married several times. I don't know where to start. So I dumped that for a moment. And then I said, tell me the things you like. And so she talked about music. She liked horses. And then she said, oh, and I love hats. I said, okay, tell me about your hats that you got. And she said, well, when I was at school, I had to wear this straw boater thing, and I didn't like that. And then I became a bit of a hippie. So I had this floaty thing with ribbons. Then I got married in this white hat. And then when I got divorced, I went out with my girlfriends and I bought a sassy red hat. And so and I stopped her when she got to about 9 or 10. And I said, that's your book, my 10 hats.
Oh
Each
my God.
chapter that you build around that. And it's specific. It's particular. And give yourself 2 weeks to write one chapter, 2 weeks to write the next. After a couple of months, you've got a book. Might not be a good book, but it'll be a book and it's something to work on. And you've done it by having a particular way into your life. And it will have a reality about it that it wouldn't if you were just pouring out your feelings all the time. That would be a way forward, I think.
Oh, God, I love that. Goosebumps. Goosebumps from head to toe. That's amazing. I'm definitely going to be using that. Ooh, oodles caboodles. It's just me having a short little break in this interview to bring you some information. Now, should you be looking for your purpose, you have to check out my book. It is called Sold Out, SOUL''D, Sold Out. It's your guide to finding your life purpose. And you can find this on brandsashka.com/books. Go and have a look. And now let's get back to the interview. Yippee! In closing, I ask all my guests 2 questions. My head is buzzing with ideas now because of that. 2 questions I ask all my guests, and one of them being, how would you like to change or challenge the world doing what you do?
If my work ever works, it's A, because it's made people laugh, even if it's been serious, but also reawakening people. I think that idea of awakening, of becoming a little bit more alive than you were, if I've done that for anyone, then it's been worth the journey, really. Particularly, I did like being a children's writer. I don't do very much now, but that moment, because you can't bullshit children.
Yep.
If you go into a class and you tell a story, if they're bored, you're going to know within 10 seconds. And if they're not, perhaps you've got a little bit of magic and they're awakened. And so, I think that's the greatest gift you can give to other people, but it's also one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself, reawakening yourself.
I love that. If you could fill in 3 of my 5 main highest values and what they mean to you. So creativity for you is?
It's questioning, as I've outlined. It's openness, rejecting nothing. And I think it's also living in your senses. I think people think, I have trouble with the word creativity, but I know people think it's to do with your imagination, it's to do with what you're thinking. I think a lot of it is to do with paying attention to the world. That's what I love about little children, the way they'll be fascinated by a blade of grass for 10 minutes or feeling of sand through the fingers. So I think it's rediscovering the world through your senses.
I love that. Yeah, I see creativity as creating something from nothing and exploring. So for me, creativity is exploring. Passion for you is?
Our passion for me is animals.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I do love animals. So I think if I was pushed, I sort of prefer animals to people, really.
Wow. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I love that. And lastly, wisdom for you is?
Constantly reminding yourself what you don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Steve, for being with us here today and sharing your incredible, and I'll say this, creativity and your golden thread and your wisdom and your passion that you have for us and your imagination and your humor. And for our listeners, you can find out more about Steve in the show notes, his favorite book, his favorite quote, where you can find him on social media and his website, and also being able to get in contact with him if you're planning on writing a book or wanting to awaken your senses, get in contact with him. Really, really interesting human being. Thank you so much for reaching out and blessing us and honoring us with your presence today. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's been lovely to meet you, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a great show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, remember to be fast and furious, staying in that gorgeous 5D energy and being the change that you want to see in the world. And we shall see each other again next week. Love you lots. Bye-bye. Dang, that was just supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I enjoyed having you on board, and please do me and you a favor. Head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. Click subscribe, and a super bonus, leave your review and you stand a chance of being announced and advertised on the show. I'm always striving to ensure that your brand is uplifted and empowered. Remember, done is better than perfect. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and send in your feedback too. You're the absolute best. Keep rocking.